Yo, 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 what is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN. And today, I thought we would do a little bit more of a statistical dive, along with a philosophical dive on is it worth playing out a 2v4 in a KvK group? And were BDO and Echo justified in taking the 2v4 challenge based on their initial stance of wanting to get as much fighting out of the season as possible and feeling that this was going to be the best way to do it? Well, we're going to look at some numbers, even though the season isn't over yet. There's about 2 days left until end of season, where I believe that's when rewards will be dished out. And then we have the actual season end, or when the KvK map gets closed out, which is going to be on the 2nd of May. So as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you throw us a because that's a lot. Thanks. So let's go down and look at some numbers. I'm going to show you some screenshots and then some stats, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on, do I think that BDO and Echo came out with the W altogether or not, based on what they initially stated of wanting to accomplish in this KvK? Because I think it's very clear that we can see, based on the map, that at the moment, it is the other team in GG, RAC, ROG, WAO that are clearly getting the dragon, the objective win this season in the FZ, based on where Echo is currently on the west side here of the FZ. However, still fighting from what you could see here, right? I mean, the fact that they're still going at this point, not letting up, I feel like to keep fighting and to keep giving your opponents fights without this, and at the same time, their opponents not giving up and saying, yeah, we still want to fight. I feel like that's a win-win all around in the end. However, when you look at where BDO is in Zone 3, there doesn't seem to be a lot of fighting. So I don't know, again, maybe someone can illuminate that for us on exactly why it at least has appeared that BDO has not been fighting for maybe the past couple days. Maybe it's just the times that we check in and we're not seeing them fight. That could very well be it as well. But I'll leave it up to some of the people that have been playing there to let us know if there has been a lot of fighting or not. Of course, I could always go and ask, and we still might do that as kind of a post-KvK, because I'm thinking about doing some post-KvK debrief interviews where we go and we talk to some of the teams, or maybe get some of the thoughts on how the season went overall from the KvK groups, and we kind of share that. So it's kind of an idea we got in the works. If you'd like to see that or anything kind of post-KvK debrief, let me know in the comments below. With that in mind, let's get to some numbers. So how did everything look pre-Zone 2, right? That's what we're talking about. So this was around March 14th, right, from data that we showed that was taken then. At the time, again, pretty clearly in favor of one side or the other. You had 116 at the time, more 100 mil pluses on the other team versus BDO Echo. You had 509, more than double, almost 2.5 times the amount of 60 mil plus players. Power discrepancy was about double. Merits were about double. But the PvP engagement percentages were really close. They were within 0.56% of each other. I mean, that's pretty banging, I think. Kills, you had about 100 mil differential on deads. There's about a 350, 360 million. And I think I meant to say a billion differential here for kills, about 100 bill. About, again, 350 million for deads. Heals, you got about 80, what is that, 80, 90? We'll say about 90 billion more heals on the other team. So, I mean, again, you can see numbers very much in favor of WAO, RAC, ROG, GG, clearly. However, now let's look at how the season has been going thus far. And I just pulled these as well as of today. So I think when I pulled these, it was around 13:30 to 14 UTC on the 27th. So now I'm going to show you these numbers. Well, before we get to the kind of final stuff, but let me show you some of the screenshots we took, right? So these were alliance merits based on the top 5 alliances. We also have personal merits, and more so kind of looking at how many people at least accumulated 1,000,000 merits in each of these kingdoms. Kind of cool that they put the merits last season home realm, and I actually have a really unique idea on how to cover that. Then we get for 60 here with Echo, we get their player count numbers. We look at GG and their merit accumulation. What was their 100 mil plus numbers? Or sorry, 1,000,000 plus player numbers that achieved. We look at ROG for their alliance merits. We get their personal merits. We look at WAO. We get their alliance merits. Again, their personal merits. And lastly, RAC. We get their merits along with their personal as well for, again, kind of bubble positions, right, that have got at least 1,000,000 or more. Now, let's look at some numbers. So here are some numbers, and then I'm going to get into my thoughts on how the season played out overall. Here you could see that, and this is me adding up just the merit totals for the top 5 alliances in the screenshots, and then just estimating, right, based on closest to the 10th. So BDO gets 4.5 billion merits. They have 201 players that reached 1,000,000 merits or more. Echo, 5.6 billion, 188. You look at their team total, and we see that 10.1 billion merits have been accumulated. And 389 players reached 1,000,000 merits or more for their team. That's a lot, I'll say. Just to give you an idea on how much that is, if we go back and we look at pre-FZ matchups, this is before Final Zone opened, their total at the time, right, from data taken on the 12th, was at 9.5 billion, right? This was before Final Zone, a couple days before. Echo and BDO in that time have, and this was for the KvK total, they've surpassed that. If you look at the numbers before FZ opened, let's give it conservative. Let's say they were at about 5 billion merits, right? Maybe a little less than that, because this clearly shows that they're at like 4.3 or something around there. So let's just say they were close to maybe 4 or 5, about 5 billion merits before the Final Zone opened, because you have to account for a couple days of PvP that still could have been happening. That means in the Final Zone alone, they more than doubled their merits that they were able to acquire. Now, it's not to say that 100% of all of those merits were from pure PvP fighting, no farming, no merit trading, etc. But you could argue that the majority of those merits were at minimum, right? Because we don't know, right? So you got to put a little asterisk there, right? Probably for everyone in that case. But then you look at the other side, and they were at, right, 5.25 merits, billion merits that they had accumulated. So I just think that that's pretty awesome to see how much PvP was going on there just from one side. If it helps at all, right, TFS, their group in 6010 at that time, had 7 billion merits. Next closest, 6011, was at 4.5 at the time, right, pre-FZ. 6012, 5 billion. And then you get 6013, 4.25 billion. And right, then it really drops off below 3 billion beyond, right? And that's pre-FZ. So to see the fact that they got 10.1 billion merits, I mean, that, again, we'll still compare against the other groups as well once the season ends, right? And like, I believe the rewards have all been distributed, so like we know, okay, this is more or less what the final merit totals are going to be, unless the KvKs are just completely done. Some of them are. We can still go through those as well. But now let's look at the other side. So the other side of this is we get GG at 2.4 bill, ROG 1.5, WA 3.7 bill, 3.4 bill for RAC. There's 194, 210, 240, 217, right? Meaning that WAO had the most amount of players overall out of all the kingdoms that had 1,000,000 merits or more. Their totals were 11 billion merits and 861 players that reached a million merits or more, right? So they had 0.9 billion more and a little more than double the amount of players that were at a million more merits, or at least I accumulated 1 million merits or more. I mean, that's a lot. Obviously, you look at them and BDO at 4.5 bill, and the highest here was WAO at 3.7, right? For who performed, or at least for, again, if you're looking at highest performer for their group, and then obviously with Echo at 5.6, and they're still fighting even now, right? So maybe they'll get that number up to maybe 6 bill. We'll see. Then we look at totals, and these are the total numbers. And let me do this so I can like raise it up a little bit here, so it makes it easier for you guys to see. So these are total numbers. So the KvK total as a whole at the moment, as of April 27th, 21.1 billion merits, 1,250 players that reached a million merits or more. If that doesn't scream of a fulfilled fighting season, and keep in mind, everyone in the kingdom, all the kingdoms here, just like a number of other KvK groups as well, were able to get all of the kingdoms into the final zone. What was the one thing we were harping on and really emphasizing early on and throughout the entire KvK for the Gen 2 pool, just like we did with the Gen 1 pool, but a lot more in Gen 2 because there was just a lot more kingdoms there, so it was a lot more fair and balanced matchups. The whole idea of what we touched on was how can we get as many kingdoms, if not up to everyone, into the FZ, right? So people don't get zone locked out. You get your final boss crescendo PvP. Why? Because if everyone makes it to the FZ, you now are going to have higher engagement percentages. You're going to have higher contribution percentages. You're going to have a lot more fighting, a lot more merit gains, and everyone wins. It's a win-win across the board, right? And then if you get pushed out of the FZ and you want to go zone lock someone, that's fine. But at least allow everyone to get there, because that's the whole point of doing your pre-KvK diplomacy, is that most of the time people were trying to go for 3v3 matchups, but the 3v3 matchups are only good if everyone makes it to the final zone. It doesn't do anything if you zone lock people out of zone 3 once the cross zone 3 pass is open. Kind of a moot point. It's like, why go through all that effort of doing diplomacy if we're just going to zone lock people out and then effectively just get, right? And I mean, I do say it respectfully, but just basically at that point get an easy win. Right? Why not? Why, especially because you have to think about it, if you're doing all the diplomacy to try and come up with a fair 3v3, it defeats the purpose. Isn't it contradictory at that point then to just zone lock them out of 3? Now, it's not to say that you can't have fighting at the cross zone 3 passes, but save the final battle for what the most balanced and fair matchup is that you worked on to get to before the KvK started. Right? At least follow through on that. And then, like we say, set it for a week. And this is the thing, is keep in mind, you can play, and I tell this to people all the time, you can play the game however you want. Right? In a sense, you do not have to play the game the way that the developers intended for you to play the game. And I say that in the sense of that you can agree to whatever you want to agree to. If everyone wants to come together and say, look, this is how we're going to play out the zones, and we want to ensure everyone makes it to the FZ, and then if a week passes and we're still fighting, then we can go ahead and attack each other and cross on things. Like, you can come together and make those agreements on your own. And if you think that you can do those on your own, think about what else you can do, right? Again, even giving a huge shout out to 6014, which includes OAH, BXS, NW, Dawn, LTS, AC, they agreed to no bastions. And guess what? Up until this point, I haven't heard of anyone breaking that. So that's an example of a KvK that set a phenomenal precedent and standard where they felt that, you know what, we're not really that big of fans of bastions. We're just going to agree to not use them. You can do that. So to me, I just think it's funny where we get into these situations of people complaining. And again, I'm not going to go off on a tangent on bastions. I'll just simply say, People have been complaining about Bastions for a while, but they don't do anything about it. Then you finally get a KvK group. And again, maybe there's other KvK groups. I'm only speaking to 6014 because they told me that they decided to not use Bastions in there. And there you go. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Right? Just because something's in the game doesn't mean you need to use it. And just because a mechanic or a function or a process is there, it doesn't mean you have to follow through on it. It's just, again, you make the KvK what you want. And I think there needs to be a lot more kingdom and player empowerment in that front, because that is also a way to show the developers in the game as a whole of what the community values, of what's important. So the last thing I want to get to here is, what do I think about the 6009 KvK overall? Do I think that BDO and Echo fulfilled and accomplished their goals and what they set out to do? Personally, I think absolutely. I don't think anyone can look at this KvK group when you look at the numbers at the moment and say that they did not achieve what they wanted to achieve, regardless of the KvK loss, right? Objectively. And you could argue territorially, right? In the FZ, nearly that. But if their goal, as they stated, was, hey, how can we get the most fulfilling PvP season possible, regardless if we win or not? Now, that doesn't mean that they didn't want to win, right? Let's not go that extreme and say that, oh yeah, they absolutely did not care about winning. No, I'm sure if they could have won and captured Dragon and beat everyone else out of the FZ, they absolutely would want to. But what I'm saying is that to me was probably, it felt that was more of a secondary objective based on what I heard and what they had told me early on as well, and what we saw, right, for the reasons on why they opted for the 2v4. It was that the number one primary objective, from my understanding, was how can we get the most PvP fulfilling season? Objective 2 or secondary objective is, yeah, let's try and win. And I feel like that needed to be the case in order for them to give the showing that they did. And so, right, I mean, and I'll say this, I spoke to some people from the other team, and they even told me that, you know, for a day or so, or after the FZ opened, even leading up to the FZ, and I think like the first few days, if it was after the FZ opened, or the first day or two, that like they felt it could have gone either way at that point, but they were still confident. They still felt like, hey, we had a chance, but it was a little iffy. And that, I think, is such a complimentary testament to this KvK as a whole, is that both sides felt they could win. Both sides put forth a quality effort. I don't think anyone can sit there and say that, oh yeah, one side didn't fully contribute more than, or didn't fully contribute up to their capacity for what they could, because I haven't heard anything about that. Again, regardless of what you want to say about, like, could BDO still be fighting? I'm sure maybe they could be. And maybe some of the other kingdoms could still be fighting too as well. But if you're talking about the fight that they gave us, with how much fighting and still some of the fighting that's happening now, I feel like this is a truly fulfilling PvP, or fulfilling KvK, with the amount of merits that have been collected in this season and the amount of overall PvP that has transpired. Now, could we have got more longer lasting PvP? For example, like the PvP that's happening in 6010 between WB, TFS, SSG, and then they're going up against EIL, NTS, and A2G? Sure. Right? I'm sure if it was a 3v3 at that point and we were able to balance it out a little bit more, and then they still had their final zone, right? Could they have maybe got as many overall merits? We'll see, right? I think it's going to depend on what what that 6010 group comes out with. Are they going to be able to get close to the 20 billion merits that we see here with this group, or 21.1 billion merits that they've accumulated totally? Or is it going to really fall short? I think those numbers, to me, are going to be really interesting to look at once more KvKs are officially finished, and we should say maybe the remainder. And we look at, okay, well, what was the matchup? And then how many merits were accumulated? Because I feel like if 6009 ends up being the standard or the goalpost setter for the most amount of merits in a KvK season, which they very well could be, then you almost need to look at, okay, well, how did they achieve that? And is doing a 2v4 the only way to get that done, or can you still get that done with a 3v3? And obviously, there's a lot of factors here, right? Starting kingdom placement, being able to maybe choose your own starting zone 1 placement, maybe being able to choose your teams. It's just, there is a lot that goes into it. It's not just simply, oh, well, hey, they were able to do it. You kind of have to look at, well, what was available and what was not available, and kind of forced on not only them, but obviously other kingdoms as well in other groups. So that's it for me. I would love to know what you guys think. Do you feel that BDO and Echo still fulfilled what they wanted to? No, it doesn't matter. They lost the season. Sure, they were able to get a lot of merits, but they didn't get the W. Doesn't matter. GG, no re. Or do you feel like, there's a little bit more to it than that? And I can kind of see how one team obviously clearly got the KvK objective territory win, and the other team got their win out of having the most fulfilling PvP that they were able to get. Or, maybe you just don't care about that. I'd be curious to see kind of where everyone lands on that and how you feel yourself when you look at it. And does it matter to you at all the insane amount of merits that this KvK group accumulated? Because to me, I partially feel like that has to be some form of consideration for that. That's it. Get out of here. Hope you guys have a good rest of the day. As always, until next time, we'll catch you later.